friends. Thank you for being here. The essential kind of the focus of this discussion is how internet now and how mobile voice in the past really changed the way we lived, interacted, communicated, learned, and performed our task, both social and professional, in cities. And this is, I think, a monumental change, and we don't even know how it's going to impact us in the future. And I'll lay out a few data points, and I'm happy to come back and talk to you about these in the questions. But first, something that will shock you, or surprise you at least, if not shock you, is that every day in the world, this is what happens in the internet kind of space domain. 207 billion emails are sent, 8.8 billion YouTube videos, 4.2 billion Google searches every day. So much of GB worth of data is exchanged, so many tweets and photos and Skype calls and Amazon purchases, etc., etc. I mean, this data, I mean, even to somebody who lives in India or in China, this is, huge. And I think this is truly transformational because part of it hasn't yet begun to happen, which means that in India, we don't have the kind of, as I will show you, internet ownership yet for this kind of magnitude of levels of usage that are happening in the rest of the world. When they happen in India, this will truly become a transformational moment. So this is what's happening in the rest of the world. And just for sake of illustration, there are lots of places in the globe that are not covered by internet, including in India. And Facebook and Google. I'm going to take names of entities, primarily not in terms of any commercial sense, but what they are doing in the internet domain. This is a drone which is powered by Facebook, powered by solar, and by Facebook, owned by Facebook, which is going to provide internet signals and coverage in spaces that are very difficult for ordinary fiber or even for wireless technology to exist. So this is going to literally cover the entire, so there are areas in Africa, there would be areas in Northeast, you think about archipelagos of Indonesia where it's very difficult to cover. So this is the kind of technology that is emerging, and Google's project called the Project Loon does the same thing, but instead of using a drone, it uses a balloon, and balloons are going to then cover the rest of place where you don't have coverage. Now, the data on India, you know the data on mobile. The data on mobile, we have 1 billion plus subscribers on the mobile phone in India. But internet has been slower, much slower to take off in India. And there is a lot of potential, as I was saying. We have just about less than 30% teledensity of the internet in India. And if you break it up between rural and urban, you will see that urban is much more and rural is much lesser. I've also ranked the cities in terms of internet subscribers. But the important or interesting thing to note in India is that, one, the stylized fact is that urban teledensity, internet density is higher than rural. That's a no-brainer, obviously, given demand side and supply side. But the other interesting thing to note is that most of internet usage in India is driven by the mobile phone. So it's not driven by fixed wireless. It's not driven by fixed, but it's driven by wireless, whether it's fixed wireless or whether it is mobile internet. So that's going to be true for any kind of reasonable amount of time that you want to forecast internet usage in India, that's going to be true. I want to just mention at this point that there are some countries, like smaller countries like Korea, where they can lay out optical fiber cable to large parts and pervade it to large parts of the country where they have fixed connections and fixed broadband connections. But India is going to be driven, as I said, by wireless. How are internet users on the mobile using internet in India? And again, you'd be quite surprised that in India, on average, 11 apps a day are used by an average city resident. You spend 3 hours a day on the mobile. This has implications for productivity. but you're spending 3 hours a day on the mobile phone, and it's less than the amount of time that kind of users in the developed world spend. This is due to a survey that happened in 2015. I don't know whether the data has changed, but I'm sure surveys that are done subsequently would bring about some changes in the usage patterns. There are more male than female users. Usage in tier 2 cities and tier 3 cities is actually growing faster. And there, the consumption of entertainment and mobile video. Now, because you have kind of, I guess, the reason is you have the opportunities of entertainment in tier 1 or tier 3 and tier 2 cities, those options are less than in tier 1 cities and metros. The usage of the mobile for entertainment, especially mobile video, is much higher. As I said, smartphones are driving internet. 60% of YouTube views in India are from mobile phones, and children spend more time on the internet than adults do. They spend 4 hours, which is equivalent to the time that an average US resident spends on the mobile phone. So the pattern of user is not small, it's fairly high, it's through the mobile, and entertainment dominates. Of course, shopping is getting a boost, e-commerce, I'll talk a little bit about e-commerce, but entertainment is clearly driving smartphone usage in metros in India. There was a very nice article that appeared in The Economist a couple of years, I think 2015, I would really recommend, very nicely written article. They called human beings, instead of Homo sapiens, phono sapiens. This is the new kind of terminology that has emerged. The smartphone, according to them, is ubiquitous, addictive, and transformative. And it's not, the reason why this is, it's not far to see why this is happening in the rest of the world, and hopefully through the rest of the slides I'll be able to kind of at least illustrate or signal in this what is the transformative potential, both in terms of positive transformation potential, and of course there's no such thing as Pareto improvement, so there will be some downsides, but hopefully the positives are more than the negatives. Smartphone usage, why did it pick up in India? As with other things, as with the mobile phone in India, the price point was very important. Today, a smartphone, you can get a smartphone for $50 or less. And in the future, you're probably going to see even lower priced smartphones come into the country. And that is driving usage. This is parallel to what happened with mobile phones. When mobile phones first came into the country, you had those very large Motorola phones that were available for 40, 50,000 rupees. And then it dropped to less than that Vodafone home box, which dropped to 700 rupees. And then along with other policy changes like calling party pays, just the mobile voice market just took off exponentially. And I suspect the data market, which is what we are talking about, internet, is probably poised, is on the cusp of a takeoff, because several of the things that need to happen in India are happening, which is price points for the smartphones have declined. It's a very fast growing market, so economies of scale in a market like India for technology and for smartphones is readily available, and therefore the price can fall. Other infrastructure constraints are also so huge, which means that e-commerce sites that I'm going to talk about have got a lot of traction. And Android is growing very fast, which is the platform that most smartphones use. iPhone, of course, is a closed platform. Android is the open source, open platform. And it's growing at 75% year on year in 2015. So the price points are right. Android platform, open source, is growing. A lot of applications are being written for the open source. So the ecosystem around which a smartphone can grow, which is your applications, the price, the demand side, on the supply of applications, which I'm going to talk about, all that is falling into place. A lot of the parts of the ecosystem in India are happening. So, you would see, I hope this works. I want to share with you that before 94 and, before Google and after Google, and before the high-speed internet happened, and after high-speed internet has happened, I'm going to share with you. I hope this works. And this is a tone that all of you would be familiar with. Are you? I mean, you couldn't send an email properly, let alone, download a Netflix movie. and then you'd wait for it to connect, and then it would disconnect, and so on and so on. But this sound, of course, this belongs to the virtual museum now. When I was browsing yesterday, I found a lot of this is in the virtual museum. Speeds have increased in India vastly. From the 64 kbps copper lines, now we have fixed wireless, and we have optical fiber cables. Of course, that BharatNet project is still not in a state of completion where it can drive rural coverage, but today we are not talking about rural, we're talking about cities. So, speeds have also increased. Speeds of wireless access have also increased, and coming of 4G and 5G and LTE, all these technologies, the higher generation, you are, the faster the speed, and the more data you can transmit in the same, time period. So in 1 second, the amount of data that you can transmit with 3G, 4G, 5G, LTE, etc., is much faster. So is much greater. So speeds are becoming faster of access. You don't have disconnections as often. I don't know whether internet will be subject to the same issue of call drops that we are associated with now today in voice calls, but internet is a much more robust, in a sense, system than the BTSs and so on, I think. What's being used most in communication? Within communications, it's the Facebook and it's WhatsApp that dominate usage of communications. These are the two apps that dominate. And I remember many years ago when I used to teach an MBA school, a number of my students were doing a project on this new way of seeing films in India at very inflated prices compared to what it was. And everybody used to think this would be these PVR sort of establishments wouldn't survive in a price-sensitive market such as India. That was the dominant narrative at that time. And I think the dominant narrative in internet also was that the internet at these very high of course data prices are coming down thanks to the competition from Jio that has just emerged, but even at high price data points, which is what you pay for getting high speeds and high access, people are willing to pay because of what it's doing for them. And that's what I want to illustrate. So you're willing to pay higher speeds, higher price for higher speeds of data because of what data is doing to you in your own lives, apart from the ability to communicate. So, the Facebooks and the apps, the Telegram is dead, India Post struggling to survive and, has to look at newer avenues or reinvent itself to survive commercially. Travel has completely changed. And this is a dominant theme in a city today. And if you talk about emissions, if you talk about transport, you talk about mobility, you will have to talk about the shared economy. And Uber today exists in 55 countries. It's facing regulatory challenges in a number of countries, including in India. And there will always be this tussle between innovation and regulation. And that will always happen. Hopefully, over a period of time, innovation will dominate, and regulation will have to come to terms with innovation. But this tussle will exist. Just like there will be a tussle between privacy and profit in the internet space, there will be a tussle between privacy and profit. There will be a tussle between innovation and regulation. And I think over time, an equilibrium will get established, but this tussle will happen. And this is what we are seeing in the city space. It exists in 55, Uber exists in 55 cities, and it has faced, as I said, regulatory challenges in 55 cities due to security, the competitive pressure is coming from the incumbents that don't like the existence or the coming entry into the market of Uber because it is destroying profit margins. So the shared economy is what is going to dominate. And Uber and Ola represent the shared economy in mobility, and in travel, it's your Oyo rooms that you're familiar with, it's Airbnb. It's becoming much easier to get demand and supply together. And that's what kind of for us in this room, I think that's what the internet has enabled. It's making it much easier for demand and supply to come together. I remember when I was in college in DC and had to travel to New York looking for a ride, I used to go to a notice board and pin up a yellow sticker and say, I want to go to New York on such and such a day. We were able to share, but sometimes it happened, sometimes it didn't happen. You're rest assured with the internet, you're never going to fail to get an opportunity to share with somebody else, because everybody else also have access to the same device. And you've created these network effects out of the shared economy. It's happening in e-commerce. E-commerce is really kind of booming in India. Again, the same thing we were thinking, just like the example I gave about PVR and its survival. You thought the same thing about Amazon, Flipkart, and Snapdeal, but they're not only entrenched in the market, they're doing really well. There are these foreign multinational firms that are investing in Snapdeal, investing in things like entities like SoftBank. Alibaba has invested not only in Snapdeal, they've invested in Oyo Rooms as well. So that entire space is being covered by huge amounts of resources, because everyone knows that this is the future of the economy. And what is today, we've spoken with the head of Snapdeal, who's also on our board, and the two things that are clear from this slide and from conversing with him also is that the maximum growth is occurring in Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities. There are tie-ups between them and post offices because you don't have addresses, so delivery happens in post office. But that's where the most rapid growth is happening in e-commerce. Where there is still a challenge is, things in cities that we are familiar with, Grofers and Nature's Basket. That hasn't yet picked up, but it has huge potential as well, according to a report that was recently done by NASSCOM. So e-commerce is driving. What are the drivers of e-commerce? As I said, all of this, nuclear families, urbanization, convenience. It's a pain to drive in cities today. I mean, the less spoken about the average speed of a car in Delhi, the less said, the better. And it's only going to get worse unless we take some drastic action. So you have all this kind of, on the demand side, the convenience, the product range, the offerings. Then you have high-speed internet connectivity. On the supply side, I said, you're building up a good infrastructure on the VC side. There's growth of smartphones, there's growth of apps, there's growth of internet penetration, and there are varied payment options, which I'm going to come to, which is another thing which has been driven by the internet, notwithstanding the scandal that you read about this morning of the fraud in debit cards. But that's a given. That is going to perhaps happen. Internet banking, mobile wallets, digital payments, this is the next this is a part of the ecosystem that is driving the change. Paytime is so big today. It's not only become a small bank, it's also got a license for a small bank, but it's also in the business of mobile wallets, especially in rural and remote areas, people who don't have access to banking system. Paytime, it kind of consummates that transaction between the buyer and the seller, even if you don't have access to mobile banking. So this is a kind of revolution. If you remember, the financial revolution through mobile really started with M-Pesa. Recall the days of Kenya, where it was very difficult to get money out, and even if you had money, you were very reluctant to carry it on your person because of the chance of theft, of burglary, or pilferage. And that's the reason. And remittances were a big problem. And a dysfunctional banking system and the risk of theft and pilferage led to the growth of M-Pesa. And this is a revolution or a change that happened not in a developed country. This is an example that I keep giving of reverse innovation. This happened in a developing country like Kenya, albeit it was done by Vodafone and Safari.com. But it's a kind of an example of a reverse innovation that happened in a developing country, an emerging market, and then spread back to the developed world. But this is, the two. There are risks. There is no doubt to say there are risks in financial transactions, but there's huge amounts of convenience and the possibility of having financial inclusion. The transactions, etc., are there for you to see, the number of transactions, but the digital payments industry is going to reach $500 billion, according to Boston Consulting Group, and I've cited that report. And it will contribute as much as 15% of the GDP. No single industry contributes that huge amount to the GDP of our country. I mean, the closest that you could come think about automobiles, which is less than 5%, even telecommunication itself, which is less than 3%. The digital kind of mobile industry, payments industry could reach 15% of GDP, and that's a large amount. It's also a reflection of the kind of inadequacy of the financial architecture within the country that this industry is able to prosper so much. But that's the kind of... I'm going to...
This can be picked up in the session.
So there's this matrimonial side.
Yes.
There's one... those of you who are of my age, or close to my age, and lived in Delhi in the 80s, would have heard of RAJAT, Professor Arora. That's right. He's gone. He's history. His daughter is running the business. I did a check, and he's using the internet for their selfies. And there's, of course, education. There's jobs and employment. The sites on jobs and employment that internet enables. So, and I've already spoken about the shared economy in which things, internet will be connected to each other. Your fridge, your microwave, your car, your house, everything will be connected. A Fitbit will tell you when you have to take your neck medicine and whether you're, so there's more of an emphasis on preventive as far as health applications are concerned, which are available through the mobile. So I'm going to conclude now. And just one comment on the negative aspects, which is kind of data privacy versus profit, which I already spoke about. So privacy is an issue in India. The Global Transparency Report says that Indian law enforcement agencies made 3,452 requests to get access to user data. And so the privacy becomes an issue, not only commercial sale of information, but also government making use of information that is available. The dark side, children using too much of the internet. There is a decline in productivity, at least in the GDP statistics, because Kodak and all have been killed as a result. There's no Polaroid, there's no Kodak. You took 1.5 trillion photographs in the world in 2015 without being impact on GDP. Productivity has increased. There's digital distraction. How many of you at work spend more than 1 hour on the email, on your smartphone, etc.? You're destroying productivity and so on. So what's the internet going to look like in India by 2020? And this is my last slide, I'll conclude. It'll have 730 million users. We have 1 billion plus mobile users, so we'll have 730 million internet users. Most of them will be on the mobile internet. 75% of the internet usage will come in local language, which is a kind of different to other countries. And video content is going to drive e-commerce transactions. 70% of them will be on the mobile internet, and travel apps are going to dominate within the e-commerce space. What happens when you kill internet in places like Kashmir? We're doing research in ICRIER today to estimate the opportunity cost of shutting down the internet. It's been done in the rest of the world, not in India. We will bring out this study, hopefully early next year. What is the cost of shutting down the internet, economic cost of shutting down the internet? And we'll use examples from India and try and estimate that cost. Thank you very much for your patience.